Here we go. Back. Here you are on the Gill Connections Podcast. And I'm, again, just so grateful that you would press play today, right here. Quick little housekeeping before we get into today's guest, which I'm super, super excited about. Right now, we're in the middle of this new series from Tuesday through Sunday, the Gill 1918 Project. It's a much smaller 10-minute to 30-minute podcast that we're doing, kind of the TED Talks of track and field podcast, if you will. It's for coaches, by coaches. And so I hope you're enjoying those. Make sure you check those out Tuesday through Sunday. But here today, it's a Monday, which means it's our original content, our long form content, where we get to dig deep into coaches' backgrounds, histories, why they got into the sport, why they got into coaching, and maybe we learn a few things of successes, mistakes, and lessons learned, and mentors that have poured into them along the way. So help me welcome all the way from I almost said New York City, from New York, not New York City. Surprise, it's in Ithaca, the head coach of Ithaca College, the wise, the wonderful Miss Jennifer Potter. Jennifer, how are you today?
Fabulous. Thanks, Mike.
My first question to you, I was all week I've been ready. I'm like, this is my first question I'm going to ask Jennifer. Jennifer, why is it Ithaca Ithaca and not Ithaca Ithica? Because I spell it with the I every single time I write down Ithaca. What in the world? Why?
You and every recruit I don't call back. It's a Native American name.
Yeah, I've started working on spelling it correctly, and so now I catch myself every other is the incorrect way. I'm just keep thank
Right.
goodness
But
when I
it's
eat.
also in Greece. Ithaca is in Greece.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I
Hmm.
didn't even make that connection. All right, good.
Yep.
All right, well, that was just my first, like, oh man, I spell it wrong every single time. So I wonder how many emails I've sent you that you did not get because I put Ithaca and not Ithaca. Uh,
Good.
just got to learn how to spell better. Yeah, I went to school in Alabama, Jennifer. So, spelling's not my strong suit.
Troy, right? You went to Troy.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly why this podcast is a success already because the greatest university, the second greatest university in the world, to Ithaca, of course, Troy University. That's right. Exactly. How did you remember that?
I grew up in the Capital District, so Troy, New York is right near where I grew up.
Yeah, I think Troy, Alabama is like the 10th most popular Troy because there's a Troy, New York, Troy, Michigan, actually a pretty popular Troy, Illinois. Yeah, it's all over and poor little
Hmm.
Troy, Alabama. All right, my next question is, and I totally forgot to tell you this before we hit record, kind of behind the scenes here for everybody listens. I don't do research before this. So I didn't read we talked about your bio. I didn't read that, things like that. And I do that on purpose because it allows me to stay curious, right? Just allows, I don't know the story, so I get to just stay curious. But one of the things that I really love to do, it's kind of my little nerdum, if you will. I'd like to know the mascots of every college. And I can't think of Ithaca. I want to say I was going very like toughs, like jumbos, like elephants, but I don't think that's it. And now you said Greece, so now I'm kind of thinking that route. I'm gonna guess. I don't know. Actually gonna guess you're something like the bear or something like that. What's oh no, shaking your head. What's the mascot there?
That's a really interesting question. Ithaca is the Bombers,
Oh,
but we
why?
actually don't have like a mascot. It's just the name, it's just a word.
Okay, so bomber. So I think of like B-2 bombers or maybe a big, stereotypical bomb, but you don't have any kind of like actual caricature to it.
No,
Is there a history? Was there like, did you build bombers in
absolutely.
Ithaca, New York or something?
No. It's really funny. We were just having this conversation with a student athlete. Yes, what's today? Wednesday, Monday. So when I was in college here, it was at the football games, a person dressed up with like a bomber jacket, like the leather bomber pilot look.
Right.
But historically, the name came from, we were the Cayugans because
Okay.
we're on Lake Cayuga.
Hmm.
But I can't remember if it was the 40s or the 50s, but a sports writer was writing about a basketball team and said a player was dropping bombs, like
Right.
shooting
Okay.
baskets and dropping bombs. And the name evolved from that article to us becoming the Bombers.
Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
I think
I
that's why
know.
I think that's why I love mascots because there's some are very, we're the home of the bear. There's more bears in our area than anywhere, so that's why we're the Bears, or
Yeah.
whatever. One school I can't remember what it was. This is why I said, did they build bombers there? Because somewhere I can't remember which school it was. There was a big airplane factory used to be there, and that's kind of where they got it. So this is some guy saying, this basketball player is dropping bombs. Pretty common.
Yeah.
I actually would not have known that would have been common back that far. I thought that would have been kind of a newish 80s, 90s and above type thing.
Yeah.
And that caught on as the mascot. So
Yeah.
you don't have, so Mr. I can picture the guy on the sideline, by the way, with the bomber jacket and like the fighter pilot helmet or something like that. So you don't
Yeah.
have any caricature at all with that
Not even,
anymore.
yeah. When, like I said, when I was in college,
Wow.
that mascot would be at like the football game,
Yeah.
but of course that became not politically correct
Mhm.
ish. And so there's no longer that person or that mascot at a football game anymore. It's just a word.
That's interesting. I love that. I love that history.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's learn your history, Miss Jennifer. Why don't we get in our Wayback Machine here? Assuming, in this, we know what assumptions does because not everybody was an athlete. But assuming you were an athlete in our sport or other sports, where does track and field start for you?
You know, it goes back to my parents trying to get rid of me, which was this is like, I mean, I remember this like it was yesterday, which is scary, but I can't remember what I did this morning. But so my parents would be like, "Oh, why don't you run around the house 100 times and we'll time you?" And this is before stopwatches, right? And so I would just go, and then they'd be like, "Oh, wait, I lost count. Start again,"
Oh man.
or yeah. And so that's my first memory of running. And we had a farm. My grandparents lived on a farm, and we'd go there on the weekends. And same thing, we had this big front yard, and my dad would be like, "How many? Let's see how many times you can run around the front yard in an hour." And I'd be like, "All right," and I would just go. And so I just loved to run. I was just thought running was great. I was good at it, and so that was how my parents got rid of me, I think, or
Well,
kept me busy.
that that
So
that
yeah.
makes me think of like two questions. One, were you like a I don't know if rambunctious, like full of energy kind of kid? Like that's the kind of thing you do with a kid who just bouncing off the walls. Like I need to remove energy, go run for an hour. Were you that
You
kind
know,
of
I
kid?
don't, I don't know, I guess. I was an outdoors tomboy kind of kid. I hung out with my dad outside all the time, whether it be mowing the lawn or planting flowers or whatever on
Yeah,
our
yeah.
on my grandparents' farm. But I guess I must have just, yeah, or I was annoying, or I don't know. So
Well,
I just know that it was like, "Oh, go run." And I was like, "Okay." And I
my,
just did it.
my second question, and all kids are to some degree about this. Were you also just like very gullible? Because it's like, oh, I lost count, Jennifer, got to start again. You're like, oh, okay, well, let's go.
Yeah, I think probably gullible, and I was also for some reason very competitive. I wanted
Mm,
to see, like, if I did 52 laps, yesterday, I wanted to do 53 today,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
so somehow I got this, I wanted to be better than the day before, or better next week, or faster. I
yeah.
either did more, I did it faster. So somehow I got competitive pretty early because I wanted to do it better than I did the day before.
I bet that's going to play out in any kind of athletic career and certainly in a coaching career. So, how did you take running laps around the house, running laps around the farm? How did that translate into maybe track and field?
So, so I just remember like in elementary school at the beginning of PE class, of course we all called it gym class, but not you were in your PE major, you don't call it gym anymore. But we ran a 600 at the beginning of class every day, and it was me and a girl named Sheila, and we were the fastest. And so every PE class we would race the 600, her
Wow.
and I, to see who would win. And we were very competitive, and we were best friends in elementary school. I have no idea where she is today, but that was like my first like competitive experience. I feel like was that 600 yards around the playground in elementary school. And so from that in middle school, somehow, and I don't remember really how, but we had road running club in the Capital District of New York, and they did, road races. And
Hmm.
so I asked my parents, I'm like, can I join this club? And you used to get this like newsletter in the mail, and it had all the race signups, and it was back where you literally like put it in the mail with a check and signed up. So through middle school, I wanted to like just race all the time. So I ran 5Ks, 10Ks on the weekends in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. And
Wow.
then that was kind of like the beginning of my running career. And then
What, what,
I
when
had a P. Go
when you
ahead.
when you were doing it that young, like we talked about like that competitive side of you when you were younger, of like, I want to see if I could do more laps today than yesterday. Me and Sheila were, neck and neck every day. We were trying to, when you were in that club doing these 5Ks and 10Ks and things like that, like did you like keep track of like your placements and your like was that a big deal of like, oh, okay, last 5K I ran, I don't know what you ran, 22 minutes, so I want to make sure I run 21 something. Like, was that a big deal, or was it more of just like the participation of like, oh, I'm around other people, I'm competing? Like, what was it for you back then?
Oh no, I always wanted to like win my age group,
Yeah, yeah.
or run faster. And I was always kind of, I mean, I was like the only like kid in the race all the time, like there was all these adults and it was be me. And then I was a girl. So that was like, what is she doing here kind of thing. So it was also kind of like the being the presence, like I'm here and I'm doing this.
Hmm.
And this was in the 80s. So there was, it was not like I didn't have running sneakers. I ran
Mm.
in, whatever sneakers my parents bought me, so it was kind of like the challenge slash competitiveness of it, like I'm not only here, but can I beat all these adults or can I beat, all the other women or girls,
Mhm.
so yeah, it was there's like multiple challenges to it all the time that I felt like I could check off.
Mhm. So can we assume as you got to high school, you became a cross country and distance runner?
So actually in middle school we had athletics after school, like competitively with other schools.
Okay.
So I played every sport. I played soccer, field hockey, ran cross country, played volleyball, not basketball, and that was my dad's sport. We also, and then in the spring we had track and softball. So we literally ran against other schools in middle school. So I ran the 800. I high jumped. Those were probably my two events in middle school that I did. And I even went to Junior Olympics in seventh and eighth grade.
Yeah.
So I don't, again, I remember like you had like, I mean, I'm dating myself, the TAC card before USATF, right? So through my running club, it was like you had to have a TAC card for insurance purposes, right? So I got the information in the mail that you could go to Junior Olympics. And so again, I asked my dad and I went to the local meet and then I qualified for regionals and my dad drove me to Connecticut and we stayed in the lousy hotel and I competed there in the 800 and the high jump. So my track experience and running experience started way before high school.
Yeah. Did it's always fascinating to me when people play multiple sports, which highly encouraged. But that means you had a lot of choices. You could be a soccer coach right now. You could be a softball coach right now. You could be not a coach at all right now. What was it, as we're still staying in high school here, what was it that kind of gravitated more towards track than the others? And I'm assuming, by the way, you may tell me you grew up all through high school a huge soccer and you accidentally got to track. I don't know, but I'm assuming track won because we're here. Why track?
So in middle school, I had a PE teacher who I thought was the coolest thing ever. Her name was Mrs. Baldwin, and I gravitated to her. So
Mhm.
she was a big runner, and she was also my gymnastics coach because I was a gymnast as well.
Of course.
So I decided in the seventh grade that I wanted to be her. She was a PE teacher, she was a runner, um, and so I just thought she was the greatest thing since sliced bread, as my mother would say. And I just wanted to be her. So, but her thing outside of gymnastics was she was a runner. So we had that in common. So I kind of decided then I kind of just wanted to be her, whatever that was. And I didn't even know really what that was at the time. But I kind of became the best at track and field
Mhm.
in seventh and eighth grade
I,
and and running.
I love that story, Jennifer, because whether she knew it or not, you probably, probably gravitated towards her and she probably kind of knew like, oh, Jennifer, has an affinity for me and things like that. But sometimes we don't know that other people are watching and our influence is still extremely large with them. Positive and negative, by the way. So maybe always steer towards the positive people. But that's
Right.
just interesting that this young lady was just living her life. She wanted to be a PE teacher and liked to run and gymnastics. And here Jennifer is just, I kind of like picture this like bright eyed of like, oh, you're a runner. Okay, cool. I want to be a runner too. Like you're so cool. You're a PE teacher. I'll figure what that is, and I'll go do that. That's I love that. What a great positive influence on you, and what that now has begot to other positive influence. So cool. All right, keep us going.
So in the eighth grade, again, I played all these sports. We had PE class every other day, but on the days that I didn't have PE class, I still would go and hang out and sit in the gym and just watch
Of
her
course.
teach
Yep.
or be a part of it. I just loved athletics. My dad was an athlete, and again, I was kind of a tomboy, like I said, and
Yeah.
I was always outside, and you had a tennis racket or a basketball or
Yep.
kickball or baseball. We stayed outside and played all the time, and a lot of it was just pick up sports.
Right.
And I was good at it. I was athletic, so I enjoyed the fact that I was good at something. And then, like I said, I just loved PE class, and I just didn't want to not be anywhere else. I wanted to be there, and so it just became something that I knew I loved, and it's something that I was really good at. And like I said, at the time I was a gymnast as well, but she was our gymnastics coach, so I spent a lot of time with her in the winter sports. But in eighth grade, I really wanted to join the high school team, but our school district was not a school district that allowed it.
Mm.
So I was kind of sad initially that I was like, I want to be, because we had freshman, JV, and varsity in high school, and I wanted to be on the freshman team as an eighth grader, but I was good enough, but they didn't allow it. So I just kind of hung out and continued to play all the other sports. But when I got to high school, yes, I ran cross country in the fall, but I didn't do indoor track. I was a gymnast in the winter
Ah.
and then did outdoor track. Um, and then gymnastics actually kind of, I got not good enough, for it. And so I became a cheerleader. Um, so I got a lot of flack for that. Like, what are you doing? That's not a sport, blah, blah, blah. But my aunt was a New England Patriot cheerleader. And so I kind of got oh, I can be a cheerleader. There's gymnastics involved, whatever. And so I tried out for cheerleading, and everyone's like, I can't believe, you're this big varsity athlete and you're going to be on a cheerleader. And I was like,
Okay.
this is fun, like, this is great. So I didn't do indoor my junior and senior year. I was a cheerleader, a varsity
Wow.
cheerleader.
Wh-
Yeah.
When you say, I think your words were, I got not good enough for gymnastics. Like I think about track, and I think of someone who joins track as a freshman, sophomore, and you can't beat genetics, right? There is a ceiling to all of us, to what we can do in any of our events. And even if a kid just, doesn't pan out in a certain event in high school, and meaning when I say not pan out, meaning they're not going to be able to go to college to do their event. There's still a place for them in the track team, right? Like even the kid that comes in and does hard work and shows up every day and jumps 4 feet in the high jump. It's like, all right, it's probably not a college opportunity, but you're still in the team. We don't say, hey, you're not good enough to be on the team. In gymnastics, is that not the case? And now I've heard of like kids getting too tall and things like that. But is it the case like when you get to a certain point, it's like, man, you're still a level 6. It's just not happening. Go find something
Yeah.
else. Is
Yeah,
that right?
basically, like most of my teammates, like I grew up doing gymnastics in the recreational,
Mhm.
like we had great recreational sports as a kid in my town. And again, that's where my PE teacher was. I met her initially, she was in part of rec sports. And so I did it during the year, did it in the summer as a kid and youth. But most of my teammates were in more of like the club competitive situation, and that was not me.
Yeah.
So I kind of grew out of that. Like I was okay enough to
Yeah.
be in it in like eighth and ninth grade, but the next step level for me was, I was not a year-round gymnast, and
Yeah.
so I was not good enough to make our team.
That makes sense. My daughter, who's fifth grade, loves gymnastics, but doesn't want to compete. She competes in other ways, but she's like, I don't want to, go to the competition, which I'm okay with because of just my feelings about the uniforms and that goes into some cheerleading too with any young lady, especially my daughter, of course. But so I'm completely okay. I thought I'd be a little upset, like, what do you mean you don't want to compete? But I was like, oh, okay, but she still wants to do gym. She loves the tumbling. She of course loves the social aspect to it. And I'm already seeing like, oh, you're not year round, and oh, you missed the first half of the summer because you're doing the city play and things. It's like there's just like little hints of like, yeah, you're not all in, so you're probably going to be all out. And I'm like, hey, I don't, that's harsh for not just harsh, but like, I don't know if that's correct for a fifth grader and even a high schooler, for crying out loud. So, okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So high school, we're a cross country runner. We are gymnastics and then cheerleading during the winter and then track in the spring up in New York, which is an interesting state for track and field, I learned, in regards to high school and some of the things you do there. Very, very cool things and very weird things, in my opinion. We'll get to that. So tell me about your high school track experience. What were you a miler, and how was your relationship with coach, and how'd all
It
that go?
started out as a distance runner. So
Mhm.
I ran like 3K,
Mhm.
1500,
That's right.
800 going back to middle school because I ran the 800 and high jumped in middle school, which is
That's
an
right.
odd combination, but
Mhm.
somehow was what I did. And then um, in PE class, my high school track coach, was a PE teacher at the high school, and we did the track, you know, part of PE class, and I jumped over a hurdle in PE class, and which is a curse word in my life now when we talk about hurdles.
Same. I was like, well, since she's saying the other guy said it, I won't correct it. But yeah,
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 I'm like, we don't say jump hurdles. But I jumped over
Amen.
a hurdle in PE class, and she said, wow, maybe you could run the 400 hurdles. And I was like, what? What's that? And she's like, well, you're a distance runner and you kind of could hurdle. So, let's try it. So sophomore year, like our first outdoor track meet was a scrimmage against this really small school. And she says, let's try it. I was like, all right. And so I did it, and it was ugly. And I think I ran like 70 seconds, and I was like, okay. But I thought it was fun and different, and I guess I was good at it. So that was how my 400 hurdle career started. And so I kind of became this 400 hurdle, 800, still high jumped person.
Yeah.
And I just, the more you did it, the better you got at it. And then I was pretty good. So,
Yeah.
and then that same year, I discovered the pentathlon, and I was like, "What's the pentathlon?" And my coach was like, "Well, it's this, this, and this." And I'm like, "Well, I could do that." And so there was state qualifiers for the pentathlon were not in the same meet as the rest of
Right.
the meet. It was a Monday before the state qualifiers. And I said, I want to do that. And she said, well, it's Monday. And I'm like, okay. So she met me at the track on Sunday, and she taught me like how to throw the shot put and taught me kind of how to long jump. I'd already run the 800 and high jumped. And then she said, you've hurdled, but I'd never run 100 hurdles. So she's like, this is how this works. And so we did that on a Sunday. And then on Monday, we went to the meet.
Wow.
And I did well, really well. I didn't qualify for the state meet, but I broke the school record, which was kind of my goal. I was like, I want to get the school record. And that's how I became a multi, because I just saw it on the school record board and I was like, what's this? And like I said, met her on a Sunday, competed on a Monday, and that was how my multi career started.
It's funny. I was going to ask you when you start talking about, high jump in and then 400 her, I was, the kind of the duh question is to ask is like, but it's high school, so it is kind of a not great question. But like, did multis? Did you even know what multis were? So to have that and have that experience, I love when our high schoolers get to have those experiences. I just think whether they go on to become a multi or not in the next level, it just first of all probably makes them better athletes, but two makes them just a better like they know and have some respect for other. You get to learn the shot the day before. You had a little bit more respect of shot putters. Like, oh, I was pretty good at these other events, but this one's a little tougher. This one's different for me. So that's really cool. Did you like multis seem to me, I've coached a few in my past, and I know several in my present. They're a different breed. Like we talk about pole vaulters are different breeds and throwers, but multis are different breeds. Did you like when you got done with that competition on Monday, was it like a hook of like, oh, like I want to learn more. Like, what are the other multi events? Are there other multi, or was it still like, oh, I'm still a 400 hurdler who does the 800 and the high jump, things like that?
No, I mean, I think I just wanted to do it all. I
Yeah.
wanted to be good at it all. So I think, you didn't see the pentathlon any other time other than that state qualifying meet. And so, every year I would compete in that meet, but most of the time throughout the season, I ran, like 100 hurdles, 400 hurdles, 4x4, 4x1, and high jumped. And that same year, our 4x4 went to states,
Mm.
and it was like the older girls on our team, and it was really good. And I kind of assumed that my only ticket to go to the state meet was to be on that relay.
Mm.
And so that's when I kind of converted from being a middle distance runner to I want to train as a 400 runner and a 400 hurdler.
Mm.
So the following year, I was like a straight up 400 hurdler, still high jumped. And did the multi, but I was convinced I was going to go to the state meet on that relay. And so my junior year of high school, I qualified for states in the 400 hurdles and the 4x4.
Oh, wow.
But I chose not to run the hurdles to focus on the 4x4.
Okay.
So we were second in the state in the 4x4 my junior year. And
Cool.
so but I was convinced that was my only way of getting to the state meet, which I didn't realize like I could do it in other things as well. But so that was my first trip to the state meet was as a junior in the 4x4. But then my senior year, I went in the 400 hurdles, and the 4x4.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Not the pentathlon though. I was going to ask, did you ever get to
I
qualify that?
didn't. I did it.
Oh,
I did it at that meet every year, but I didn't. I guess I never. There wasn't a lot of emphasis. It seemed like in our program, like it existed, and I wasn't the only. Like I did it. I had a teammate who was older than me that had the record before me,
right.
but there wasn't. It was just not like a thing that people did per se. So it was like you did it at that meet. I couldn't even remember who went to the state meet out of our section for it, to be very honest.
Hmm.
But it was just more of like a tradition that I would do it at that Monday state qualifiers, but that I'd come back on Thursday and Friday and run the 400 hurdles and the 4x4.
Wow. One of the things last year that I learned, I went and did this pretty audacious series. I wanted to interview a high school coach from every state, including Washington, D.C., about their outdoor state meet. I kind of just wanted to learn, like, what are the differences? Like, honestly, I assumed like 80% would be all the same. And then there'd just be these little, differences, right? And found out that I was completely wrong. Like maybe 30% is the same. Like everybody does the
Yeah.
100 meters and everybody does the 4x4, but then everything else in between is all different, right? You already alluded in New York about the 1500 and the 3000. That's a unique. Not every state, and the majority of states do a 16 and 32. But one of the things that I learned about New York, and Jennifer, it's funny, and I wish I could remember the coach's name that I had. I honestly, as he's telling me this, I had to stop him and say, "Hey, are you pranking me? Like this can't be true. Like this, I just don't believe it." And it is true. And maybe it might have been different back when you were versus today too. So there may be some caveat there. But he said, and we've looked it up. He's right that New York doesn't give out a team title for the state meet.
No.
And I mean, Jennifer, he's telling me this, and I did it alphabetical, right? So by the time I'm interviewing him, I've already done, Alabama, Delaware, like I've done 25 states roughly, right? And everybody, and by the way, spoiler alert, at the very end of this, New York is the only state who does this out of all 51, including DC state meets, doesn't give out a state team title. That is crazy to me and crazy to everybody I'd say that to. It's like my most interesting fact about track and field. His reasoning, because I asked him, I was like, well, why? Like, what? Like, why? I was like, you already got everybody there. And he's like, well, the state is so big, not everybody actually goes to the state meet. And, I got a little pushback for New York high school coaches because I'm like, okay, New York's big. I'm not poo-pooing that, but so is Texas. By the way, so is Alaska. By travel wise, Hawaii's pretty big, right? As far as like, they got a helicopter and plane to other islands to do. Everybody still does a state team title. That floored me. Did you did that as a high schooler? Did that ever like was it ever weird to you or no? Because
Well,
every sport
it's
does.
interesting. We didn't even wear our uniform at the state meet. You wore a section. We represented our section. So if you look at pictures from when I went to the state meet, I have my uniform bottoms on, but a section two, and every section had a color, which so we were maroon, a section two t-shirt. That was your uniform top. So I didn't even wear my high school uniform top to compete at the state meet. And that was for cross country as well. So I guess we didn't know any different. But you got on a bus with your section and you went as a section to the state meet. And so like my high school coach traveled separately. We went on a bus with everyone else from our section. And there was, a few of the coaches were like our
Right.
chaperones. But we didn't travel with our coach. We went as a section and you wore section two. I was section two in New
Right.
York, and you wore a section two t-shirt with your uniform bottoms and you represented section two.
But I'm sure I asked this question and it was a no, or maybe my memory is just foggy. But you didn't even then still give like, okay, section two is the state champion, or section four. Like you still didn't tally up a team score. It was just individual champions, is my
I don't,
understanding.
yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, no, I don't think there was
Yeah.
any score kept. I
And
just remember, and it's funny that you brought this up because I kind of forgot about this, but yeah, you represented your section. You did not represent your high school per se. Like it would say like Jennifer Potter from Niskayuna,
right.
but we didn't wear our uniform tops at the state meet.
So wild. And Jennifer, you were an intelligent young lady. So you saw your basketball team. Someone was by the way, this is an assumption. Maybe this is all sports, and I'm just flabbergasted. Someone high school was a state champion basketball team. Someone was a football state championship team. Someone was a baseball, softball, soccer, but not in track.
No, I mean we won our. You could win your league. You could
Right.
win your section.
Yeah.
We were section champs.
Right. Right. Right.
But no, I guess, you didn't know any different. When you went on
Right.
to the state meet, it was individuals that won or relays that won, but it wasn't a team that won.
That is wild to me. I mean, now,
I never even thought about that till you brought it up. That was so long
yeah,
ago, but no, we didn't.
that's so, I mean, literally, as I'm talking to coach, because doing this, just doing the Monday podcast is a lot of work. It's 52 a year, but it's a lot of work. You've been through the process so far, right? The scheduling and things like that, and I'm doing that for 52 a year, right? So for this state meet series, I got to do 51 of these plus all the Monday ones. So I was like, man, I just don't, I won't have the resources to fact check people. Like I'm just going to have to face value. And you know what? If they're wrong, their peers are going to come at them, right? And so as the coaches tell me this, it was the only one where I was like, all right, like, hold on, boss. I was like either this is the greatest joke, and I love jokes, I love pranks, so that's cool and all. So maybe this is just a prank you're doing on me. I'm good with that. I was like, or this is the craziest thing, like you're just straight out lying. Like what? Like this can't be true. And he's like, no, man, I promise. It's just like
It is.
that's so crazy. Okay, anyway, sorry. Much to the side of all this. All right, Jennifer. So senior year, yeah, 4x4, 400 hurdles. Talk to us about you're starting to think at maybe going to college and stuff. What are you thinking about college? Talk to us about that process. And what I'd really like to know is where was coaching in your mind at this point? And it may not be, well, I don't know. You had kind of a hero idol PE teacher, so
Yeah.
maybe coaching, but where's coaching at this point, and how did the college selection process go?
So I joke with recruits because, it's so different now from the time that I was being recruited.
Right.
And so, back in the day it was the mailbox and I joke the yellow rotary phone in our kitchen, right? Like
Mhm.
that was recruiting. So, um I got a lot of letters in the mail from a lot of different schools. And, there's basically at that point in time, it was, I at New York had Empire State Games.
Mm.
So in the summer, that sophomore year summer, I qualified for Empire State Games in the 400 hurdles, and I competed in the 400 hurdles after my sophomore year, my junior year, and my senior year, and also got to run the 4x4 there. So I think recruiting actually came more from that. Back in the day, you got results on a piece of paper, you figured out where somebody lived, and you sent them a letter. Or you sent it to the high school coach. So, between my high school coach and my mailbox, I was getting letters from all over the place for being recruited. The challenging thing was, to be very honest, was I was not a greatest student. I was an okay student. I think I cared more about track and field and athletics and PE class than I did about biology. So I definitely knew I wanted to run track in college, and I didn't know, again, like, what did it mean to get into a college? Like, so you took SATs, you took ACTs, you had a GPA, and I quickly learned that the letter I got from UPenn was probably not going to happen, right? So, yes, they wanted me for 400 hurdles, but I was not going to get into UPenn. So, I visited some places that coaches were calling me, my dad and I got in the car and we went to school X and Y and Z, and kind of got an idea of like, okay, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like. But I didn't know there was a major that would result in being a PE teacher, to be very honest. So when I applied to schools, it was like I'd apply psychology or business or I don't know, something that I thought I could get into. And I just knew I wanted to run track. I didn't really think about, what it meant for me later, to be very honest. It was just like I wanted to run track in college. And so I got into some schools and I didn't get into a lot of schools. And I remember this one coach who called me like every Tuesday, and he'd be like, "So, how's your week going?" I'm like, "The same as it was last week." And I had nothing to tell this guy. And I applied to his school, but I didn't end up going. But now when I talk to recruits, I tell that story because I'm like, I don't want to be that coach. Like, I'm not going to call you every Tuesday unless you want me to call you every Tuesday, because I was never so annoyed in my whole life. I was like, I don't have nothing to tell you. And that's before cell phones. That was literally, you had to like dial the number and I had to be home for you to answer the phone. But so yeah, so I just, like got a lot of letters in the mail, and back in the day you literally filled something out on a piece of paper and my dad wrote a check and we sent them in, and my parents knew I wasn't like the greatest student, and they're like, if you get in, like you're going to go wherever you get in and you can go. And I was like, all right, and that was kind of how I looked at it. It was just a ways to a means of I wanted to run track in college, and what that meant, I didn't really know. Like, you knew what Division 1 was, you knew what Division 2 was. I didn't really know what Division 3 was. Scholarships weren't really something we talked about. It was more like, I don't know. It was just like, there's not all the hoopla that you have now. It was just more of, where do I want to end up? So at the time, I think I looked at a lot of school records at places and I was like, well, I could beat that record, that record, that record. So I want to run at that school.
Yeah.
And I had a boyfriend who was a year older than me, and he went to school in Pennsylvania. So I applied to every school around him in Pennsylvania, thinking that, that was an option. And so I just applied. I applied to like 27 schools, which is ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah. And Ithaca was not one of them. And that's where I went to college.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I thought you would Ithaca, and I'm not hearing this. Yeah, okay.
No, I didn't. So, going back to like, you went as a section for track, right? I made a lot of friends in my section via track. So my social group was boys and girls that I ran track with and against from other high schools. Right. So I became friends with all these people from different high schools. Like, we hung out on the weekends, we went to the movies, all that kind of stuff. And so I had a guy friend who went to Ithaca. He was a year older than me. And he literally called me up one day and was like, "Hey, why don't you come visit me at Ithaca?" And this was March of my senior year.
Wow.
And I'm like, where is that? And why would I come visit you?
You had no clue.
And no, I did not know.
Interesting.
And so he's like, just, don't you have, teacher conference days coming up? Just come up and visit. And I was like, okay. So I literally took my little sister because I didn't want to go by myself. She was like 8 at the time. And I drove from Albany to Ithaca in my mother's car. I
How far is that?
parked 3 hours.
Okay.
And I met the track coach in the admissions office. And he introduced himself. And I was like, "Where's Todd?" And he's like, "Oh, he'll be here later." I was like, "Okay." And so
And your little
he was,
sister is just hanging
and
out.
my little sister, yeah. But we
That's
had to be
great.
back by like a certain time because she had like this, I'll never forget, a figure skating thing at like 6 o'clock. So, I just didn't want, I was scared. I didn't want to go by myself. I dragged her with me. And so I meet the track coach and he's like, "Hey, why don't you just fill out the application?" I was like, "What?" So I filled it out and I gave it to him. And then he's like, "All right, well, Todd's going to take you to lunch with a girl on the team." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I went to lunch with this girl on the team who was a foreigner runner. And then she took me around campus and I ended up back in the track coach's office. And he's like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "I don't know, seems pretty cool, And I think he was talking to me about physical education. And I was like, "That's a major? Like you can do that?" And he's like,
Mm.
"Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, well, I like sports. Like, okay, sign me up." Right. So I literally left there. I drove home. My sister went to this figure skating thing, and I told my parents, I was like, "I applied to Ithaca while I was there." And they're like, "You did what?" I said, "I did." And 2 weeks later, I got a letter saying I was accepted. And I was like, "I think I want to go to Ithaca." And my
Wow.
parents had never seen it, never seen it. My sister had. And I just said, "I think this is where I want to go. I can run track there. They're really good." It came down to a school, that Ithaca, and a school in Pennsylvania near my high school boyfriend. But their school records were not very good. So I was like, I don't know if I want to be on that team. Like these school records are better.
Right.
I think I could be better at Ithaca. And my dad never saw it. My dad and my sister and I came to orientation in like June, July, whatever, after I graduated. And that's all she wrote.
Jennifer, dude.
I know. People don't believe it. They think I make this story up. It's the God's honest truth.
What's interesting is, I know you a little bit, Jennifer. We've done some things together at USTFCA and stuff like that. You're a very well put together person. So so I start having these like assumptions like, oh, Jennifer, bah, 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 and maybe you are today, but back as a 17-year-old, it's almost like the whim. Like if Todd doesn't call, who knows where you are, Jennifer? It's just so interesting. And then of course, this picture of you just dragging your little sister had to be like the most bored little sister. You're like, what is what can I go back? I got figure skating tonight, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that is hilarious.
Yeah. No, it's I know. I can't
Wow.
make it up. I can't make it
Yeah.
up. And I had gotten a letter in the mail from the coach, and that was Jim, who just retired
Yep.
last June. Like
Right.
Jim was my coach.
Right.
And like I had a box like of letters, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
mailbox, all the catalogs used to come, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, I was
Mhm.
overwhelmed. Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
And honestly, my high school coach, she wasn't really involved in that stuff. So she
Mhm.
wasn't, wonderful person, great coach, but it was just like hand me the letters. There was not a lot of advice. And my
Yeah.
older sister wasn't an athlete, so my parents didn't really know like
Right.
how to combine looking at colleges and athletics. It was basically, I think I want to visit this school, so my parents drove me there,
Yeah.
or I think I hit, duh. And that was just basically how it worked. And I remember the one coach that called me every Tuesday, which was annoying. And then there was some other coaches that would, reach out occasionally. And then, yeah, I had gotten a letter from Ithaca, but I
Yeah.
never reached back out and until my friend Todd called.
What's interesting is how different recruiting is today versus what it was then. How much I feel like there's some similarities though, because you're describing a lot of people of our age, the letters in the mail. There is no website to go. There's no Google that I can say, hey, what are the top 5 schools in Pennsylvania, in New York that have I can go Google anybody's school record right now. I mean, all these things were very hard and laborious to go find out. In today's, like compare that to today, it's like, okay, I can find anything and everything. Like, so I should be much more like a kid should easily by their junior year be able to have a top 10 like concrete list, and it narrows down to top 5 by their senior year and then top 1 by December of their senior year. And from experience, A lot of similarities for what you just described are still happening today. A kid goes, I don't even know who your school is. What's a Division 3? What is a school record? What's a top 10? I want to do something in physical education is a major. Like, I mean, all these things that are literally at our fingertips today, and people are still maybe it's ignorant now at this point because the education is right there in front. Like you could easily go find it where it was much harder in our time. So it's just interesting how so much things are different, and yet boy, there's maybe unfortunately a lot of similarities in
Yeah.
how kids choose schools and majors. It still rocks my world that we, make 18-year-old kids, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids pick a major that is going to affect them for the rest of their life at that age when they don't even know the school 3 hours away from them, for crying out loud. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that. Okay, so yeah, through the grace of a lot of things, you end up at Ithaca, which is where you were supposed to be. We now know by hindsight. So I love that. So how was the transition to college? Did you do more multis? Did you stick to the 400 hurdles? What happened here in college?
So, again, so different from now. I didn't ever talk to the cross country coach who was a different coach. So I didn't run cross country when I arrived. That wasn't in the plan.
Mhm.
And so I was bored, so I got a job and there was no practice. And, track started in January when you came back from Christmas break.
Oh,
And so I was like, what do I do with myself? And so I got a job. I became a manager of a sports store in the mall, that sold like NFL, Major League Baseball, like t-shirts and glassware, whatever.
right, right.
And you literally like came back from Christmas break and the first day of classes, you started track practice.
Huh.
And so we started practice on a Monday. We had a meet on a Saturday. And, so I pretty much
What,
came
what,
in as
was that an Ithaca thing or that was the culture back then thing of all track? Like why not until for
I'm
track?
fairly certain that was the culture. Like
Yeah, yeah,
fall sports were in the fall.
yeah, yeah,
Winter sports started when school started in January. I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
we didn't, I don't like, we didn't come back early. We didn't start in the fall.
Right,
We
right, right.
just came back on Monday for spring semester. And I remember our Coach Nichols would send us like workouts to do over Christmas break, which half of them I didn't do just
Mhm.
because I didn't,
Right.
like I was like, okay. And so we just literally came back to school and just started practicing and competing. And
Hmm.
so
Interesting.
I did the multi, but it was only in our conference championship. I ran the 400, I ran the hurdles, I high jumped, you know, and come outdoors, I did the 400 hurdles. I did not do the outdoors, but the heptathlon again was the pent you saw in our conference meet in our regional in ECACs,
Hmm.
but you didn't see the hep other than our conference, our state. We had a state conference, and I don't
Hmm.
even remember if it was at ECACs when I was in college, but
Interesting.
and I'm not sure it was at NCAA's until maybe the HEP, I don't think until maybe my junior year.
Yeah, not
So you have to, like,
surprising.
there was no steeplechase, there was no pole
Yeah,
vault, there was no
yeah,
hammer. And I don't think there was a multi in NCAA's in 89 or 90.
yeah.
I don't remember,
Yeah, I was
but
gonna say, I
yeah,
was
I
gonna
didn't do the multi outdoors.
Yeah, I was gonna say not surprising because of what I know about the events you just mentioned, the steeple, the vault, the hammer. It's crazy. As advanced as we are today in 2025, and of course you could have arguments about that. It was 25 years ago. 25 years. That's not that long ago. We didn't have women's pole vault, women's hammer, and women's steeple. Those
We didn't
literally just
triple jump either.
wow, wow, that's right.
There wasn't triple jump until my senior year of high school. So that was 1988.
That's so
Yeah,
wild to me. Wild.
girls didn't triple jump. And I
Yeah.
had a teammate who pole vaulted on the boys team because she wanted to pole vault
Oh wow, yeah.
in
Oh,
high
that's
school.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. All right, so you're majoring in physical education. So you want to do something PE teacher, something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean also I want to be a track coach, but where was the thought of being a track coach at that point?
So Coach Nichols, who was our men's coach here and our women's coach for many years, I just thought it was neat. I'm like, he's a coach. This is great. And so I kind of made the decision when I got here was I think I want to be a coach. And I kind of knew that in the seventh grade when that PE teacher I had was my gymnastics coach. And I was like, I want to be this person. And so then I realized, okay, you could do this at the collegiate level, right? Like I could be him, or as a PE major, you had every coach at Ithaca as a teacher, as a professor.
Oh,
So I had to take every sport, and you had the coach from that sport as your teacher. So I was
cool.
like, I had these amazing mentors, like, our lacrosse coach I took lacrosse from, and our softball coach I
Yeah.
took softball from, and so on. And I was like, this is amazing. Like these people are so great and I want to be them. And so, yeah, that was kind of when I got here and was exposed to all these collegiate coaches as professors and my own coach. I thought this is it. That's what I want to do. And I liked being a PE major, and I had to go out in the school and actually teach
Mhm.
initially, and I was like, this is not what I want to do, but I will get this degree, and because it will be
Uh,
how I get to do what I want to do.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
So
difference between being a PE teacher and being a coach. Right, right, right.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it was great. I loved the classes. I had no idea I had to take like anatomy and kinesiology and biomechanics and ex-phys and
Right, right,
physiology because I was not a very good science person, but I was
right.
like, if that's what I got to do, then I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And but yeah, like I got exposed to the teaching part of it right away, and I'm glad that I did. I knew what I was getting into, but I was like, that's not what I want to do. And I student taught my senior year, and it was great. I loved it, but I was like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a coach.
You mentioned, and I'm really grateful. I'm going to wrap this all into a package I think is really important for people to hear. I'm grateful for your openness and authenticity about speaking about your grades in high school, not being so great. I love how you said I like track. I didn't necessarily like science, right? Biology, right? Did you? Did that continue through college? And then when I say struggle, you can define that in many different ways. I'm not saying like, did you almost flunk out or anything like that, but how were academics on the college side for you?
Much better.
Yeah, saying, okay,
I mean, it was the ways to the means.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like if
I'm
I
with that.
stayed in college and I did well, I could run track.
Yeah, I'm with that.
And
No, no judgment. Here's where I'm going at. It's interesting to me. I believe it's probably the reason, it's one of the reasons why junior college track and field is my absolute favorite division out of everything, pros, middle school, everything in between. I was a junior college coach for a short time, and I just, I look at those kids and I just think, man, these are, this is going to sound a little mean, but it's me. They're misfits, and that's what I am. Meaning, these are kids that struggled in grades or struggled with athletics and needed extra years to develop things like that. Right? Couldn't afford 4-year school, things like that. And that's me. That's why I have such a heart for junior college academics. And so I like people in my mind deserve second chances and third and fourth and fifth. And God bless if I didn't get third, fourth, fifth chances, I'm not here right here, right? And I saw this tweet the other day. I think it was a basketball coach, basketball or football. It wasn't track, thank goodness, where I would had to have responded. And they said they were like playing out the scenario of talking to a recruit. If a recruit tells me, if I say, "What's your GPA?" and they say 2 point, I just stop them right there. No thanks. And I'm like, oh man, with that kind of attitude, do you know how many great people have 2 point something GPAs that if people, that's what yeah, this is where, yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, first of all, how many 2 point kids in high school go on to become 3 point whatevers in colleges? And by the way, now that we're of our age, Jennifer, who gives a crap about what our GPA was? It does not affect who we are today as professional
thank
adults,
God,
right? Thank
no,
God.
no,
Right,
I'm with
right.
you. Like, yeah, I mean, I felt very fortunate to get
Yeah.
into Ithaca, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna bet money it had something to do with the fact that I was a really good track and field
Sure,
athlete.
sure, sure.
I'm 99% certain that had all of it to do with
Hmm,
it,
hmm, hmm.
back in the day. And probably also that my parents could pay for me to
Hmm.
go to college. That was, kind of like I said, my dad's like, you get in, you're going, like, we'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
right.
And because I don't think my parents thought I'd get into college, um, to be very
Okay.
honest. And,
Like, yeah, we'll pay for it. She ain't getting in there. We're
you know,
good.
you know, and the reason I like, honestly, like stay, like I wanted to run track. Like, so I had to like do the work to stay in college
Yeah,
to run
yeah,
track.
yeah,
I'll be very honest.
yeah.
That was the goal. I also wanted a degree. I knew that
Mhm.
like my dad's like, you're gonna graduate, you're gonna get a degree. Like that's a
Mhm.
no discussion.
Right.
My parents were very on top of my academics, but I just, I was distracted.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
sports to me were it. Like I just wanted to play sports and
I,
run track.
I think it's very cool, very impressive. You get a 3.9, 4.0, you score 36, and that's so cool. Wow. I mean, that's an achievement. Bravo. But you're not a better person because of that. And you're not a worse person because you get a 2 point something and an 18 or whatever. 12. I don't care. I coach junior college, so I coach plenty of people that made 12 in their ACT. That doesn't make you a better or worse person. So it was just remark that you again, your authenticity of being able to say that in public. I thought that was important for people, not only for people, coaches who are listening today, as far as yourselves, but also when you're recruiting athletes. And I understand there's admissions minimums and things like that for whatever school, and those are all different. But man, if you're at a school that allows 2.0s, don't look down your nose at someone who makes a 2.0. It does not
Yeah.
make
I mean, I
them a
couldn't
better
get
or worse
into Ithaca
person.
today, but
Is
in
that right? That's
1988,
funny.
I
That's
could.
funny. Okay, so we go through college, we get a physical education degree, we into the means. I love that. You want to be a coach. This is the eye is on the prize. So we get through college, we graduate. What's our first step?
So during my senior year, I was talking to Coach Nichols about like, how do I do this? Like, what's next?
Right.
And he's like, well, probably, and in the state of New York, you had to get a master's degree to keep your teaching certificate.
Mm.
So I kind of
But you
agreed
don't
with my,
but you don't necessarily want a teacher certificate.
no, but you had to have a master's within 5 years to keep your teaching certificate.
Okay.
So my parents and I kind of decided I probably should just go right to get my master's. Like, don't waste time. Like, go to grad
Mhm.
school. And so the same conversation I'm having with Coach Nichols, my coach at the time and mentor, like, what do I do next? And he was like, okay, well, you need to maybe get a graduate assistantship.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, what's that? And so he explained it to me. And so I started to look at grad schools in physical education. And so again, it was back when you like opened a book and you went down and see what schools had masters in phys ed. And I quickly learned that, and I took the GREs and all that kind of stuff. I quickly learned that I did not have the grades to get into a lot of the schools that I thought I wanted to go to.
Oh,
So,
right.
like for example, I somehow learned who Dorothy Doolittle was, and she coached at Tennessee,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
orange was my favorite color.
yeah.
And Dorothy Doolittle, I don't know if you ever knew who she was, but she always wore like fancy hats and fancy track outfits to coach in.
Okay.
And so I thought I wanted to be her. Like she was cool. Like she was always like done up and
Yeah, yeah.
she didn't look like the track coach part. She always had these fancy track outfits and these big hats, like
That's
fancy,
cool.
like you'd wear to like the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I reached out to her and I was like, do you have graduate assistantships? And she's like, I do. And I applied, but I didn't get in.
Mhm.
And so I was really sad because I wanted to go to Tennessee for grad school and I wanted to wear orange and I wanted to be her. Like she was the coolest thing. And so I quickly learned that, you gotta, find the program that you can get into. So long story short, somehow I had a friend who was a PE major. He was older than me. He was a baseball player. He went to Eastern Kentucky.
Hmm.
And he was a master's degree candidate in phys ed at Eastern Kentucky, and he coached baseball. And he's like, you should apply. And I was like, all right. So I applied to Eastern Kentucky. I reached out to the coach. He's like, I don't have any GAs, Jen, but you can come and coach and go to grad school, and I may have one in a year.
Right, right.
So I said, okay, I'm moving to Richmond, Kentucky. And so
Now that's a big move from a New Yorker to
I had
Richmond,
no idea.
Kentucky. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. It was just it was a way for me to coach and it was a master's program that I got
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
And so long story short, it's like August after I graduated from Ithaca and the phone rings at my parents' house and it is a coach from Marshall University.
Okay.
And I'm like, yeah, this is Jen. And he's like, well, I was talking to Rick Erdman at Eastern Kentucky, and he said you were coming down to go to grad school there for free. And I said, well, I have a GA position, and he gave me your number. And I was like, okay, where is Marshall? And he's like, Huntington, West Virginia. And I was like, okay. I had to like go to AAA and get like the West Virginia book and look up Huntington, West Virginia. And he said, I can give you a GA. I can pay for your school. You can get paid, a stipend, whatever. And my dad was like, yeah.
Guess I'm going to West
And
Virginia.
so he says, why don't you come down and visit? I was like, okay. So that weekend, my dad and I drove from Schenectady, New York to Huntington, West Virginia. And I met the coach. I looked at the school, and he said, you don't even have to apply. We had a sport administration master's. And I was like, perfect. And I was like, my dad was like, free school, not free school.
No brainer.
Right. And so I was like, okay. So 2 weeks later, I moved to Huntington, West Virginia.
The coolest part of that story to me, Rick from Eastern Kentucky, right? Rick, even though he didn't have an official grad position, meaning, paying for your tuition and maybe a stipend, things like that, he had everything to gain from you coming down. Like, there's just, today we don't have enough coaches for our teams, right? Which is ridiculous, by the way. So an extra set of hands and eyes, like that's valuable. That would have been valuable for Rick. So he has nothing to gain and only to lose to tell another coach, oh, hey, well, yeah, I've got this lady coming down. She's going to coach me. I don't have a graduate position. Maybe you do have a grad position. Maybe you should call her. That is amazing. Like, that is the definition of coach, like selfless right there. Like, oh, it's probably better for Jennifer to get it paid for somewhere than it is for me to maybe be able to pay her in her second year or something, right? I just love that story from Rick. What a leader, and what a selfless act on his part. That's so cool. I love that. But West Virginia is very similar to Kentucky, especially to a New York. An upstate New York. How did you adjust to accents, sweet tea, grits?
Oh, it was interesting. Yeah. It was very slow paced.
Yeah, speed.
Was very
yes,
like
different.
go to the gas station. You're like, hurry up, let me pay. I went to my first like country western bar and had like little red flats on and stood out like a sore thumb. Yeah, it was.
You were the person. You were the person with the accent.
Right. Exactly. No. Yeah, I was the Yankee. And everyone made fun of my New York accent. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't have an accent. They're like, yeah, you do. And I did not like country music.
Oh,
I was like, oh God. Yeah, it was a huge adjustment, but I got to coach track.
Yeah.
Get my master's. So yeah, I mean, yeah, who would have thunk, right? I mean, people are like, how did you land at Marshall? I said, well, I was traded, basically I was, so
right.
Yeah.
So how did the transition, it's, we've explored this a lot on the podcast before about, when you're an athlete, it's a very selfish pursuit. And that's not a negative thing, but you're listening to coach and everything they tell you. It's how do I get better? How does that work out? Help me. How does this technique help me, et cetera? When you're a coach, it's more selfless. Everything I learn, I'm trying to figure out how do I speak this to other athletes to help make them better. That's a transition. How did the transition go from being athlete to becoming coach?
Well, we were in a unique situation where we had the head coach of men's and women's track and cross country. He was the only full-time person. Mm-hmm. There was 4 of us that were GAs.
Oh, wow.
And we made up the staff. Mm-hmm. So I was one of 4 GAs. And so, I was the sprints and hurdles coach. One was the distance coach. One was the throws coach, and one coached pole vault.
Were they all first year GAs? Like, did you?
We were all first year GAs.
Oh, so you didn't have like someone who like knew the lay of the land because it's their second year. You guys were all just rookies.
We were all thrown into this, like, here we go. And so our head coach was great. He maximized us, like we wanted to be coaches. And so I was thrown into the fire pretty much like, here you go. Like, you know, I wanted to be a coach, so I wanted to do anything. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. So my first job I'll never forget was sharpening pencils for the first team meeting. Um, and then I had to learn how to use a fax machine, which I'd never even seen in my life.
Mhm.
But I was just happy to be there. I was happy just like I wanted to coach. And so I, covered study hall and went to cross country practice and then went to cross country meets, even though I wasn't the
Mhm.
distance coach, because I just wanted to be involved.
Right.
And so we were kind of all thrown into this. So we just had to figure it out,
Wow.
and I called Coach Nichols, my coach here,
Right.
almost every day. It was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
do I do this? And how
Yeah.
do I do that? And what do I do next? And what do I do for workouts? And,
Right.
like, he saved my,
Yeah.
it was just a constant phone call. Like, what do I do next? How do I handle this? Blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And so between him and us other GAs and our head coach, we figured it out. I mean,
Wow.
there was no Google and there was
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you know, and thankfully part of my degree, like my first semester, I had to take exercise physiology and research methods. And so
Right.
I
Right.
learned how to use the stacks in the library, which was in the basement where you had to find all of the old magazines,
Right.
like research articles. And so I did my research project on grunting in the shot put. So I
Wow.
learned to
Really?
find, yeah. So like, will you throw farther if you grunt? And so I learned like how to find the magazines that were in the stacks in the library, which were track related. And so I used to spend hours in this basement of this library at night reading track and field articles, not just for my research project, but just in general. And this is back when you made photocopies of things. And so I would photocopy everything I thought that was pertinent to
Yeah.
track and field that I could learn from. And so,
That was
yeah,
going to be my follow-up question is, most rightfully so, when we go from athlete to coach, we typically coach how we were coached. We don't know anything else, right? That's just what coach did to me. So I don't know, it must be right. It either worked or didn't work for me, but that's all I know anyway. And then as we move through our coaching career, track clinics, peer-to-peer conversations, these kind of studies, reading articles and stuff like that help make our nuance our coaching and, affects it in typically positive ways. Was there any kind of, back then we would have had USATF or TAC level ones, level twos, any of that, or is your education coming from these articles?
yeah, no, I didn't. My level one was in 1994
Mhm.
in Atlanta. So not until my first head coaching job.
Right,
So
right.
so I graduated from Marshall in 94
Yeah,
and maybe it was 95 because the Olympics in Atlanta were the following year. So
right.
in
Yeah, yeah.
1995, I became a head coach at Hartwick out of grad school, and we flew to Atlanta to take level one with Lauren Seagrave,
Yeah.
Oscar Jensen,
Mm.
Wendy Trevilian,
Yeah.
and Boo.
Wow.
Those are my four level ones. We were in the press box of Georgia Tech Stadium. It was 100 degrees outside and there was no air conditioning. But I didn't
Ooh.
take my level one until my first head coaching job. I learned about it and we went down there.
First of all, love that was your teaching set for level one. It's funny. I took my first one in 90. Well, I would have been right around there. 96, 97, 98, somewhere around there, South Carolina. Wendy might have been the teacher, but Andrew Alden and Lauren Seagrave and Lori Shepard, former head coach at Vanderbilt. And I
Vanderbilt.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just remember it was like, oh my God, like just this like eye-opening of like, oh, wait a minute. There's some things I've been doing right, thank goodness, but oh my gosh, has there been so many things I'm doing wrong?
Yeah.
It changed my life. It was amazing. So you do a couple years there at Marshall for your grad program, and then your first full-time job is a head coach.
Mhm. Yeah.
My favorite question to ask a coach their first head coaching job probably is not pertinent to you because typically it's, what did you think was going to be easy but actually was hard, and then the inverse, what did you think was going to be hard but was easy? But you have no idea. You're fresh out of grad school. You're 2 years away from being an undergrad athlete. what you talk about, I don't even know if it's out of the fire into the frying pan, just fire, fire, fire. What do you do as a young, I mean, you're a kid still, into this day,
Oh,
you're a kid
yeah.
as a head coach. How did you navigate that?
Well, it's interesting. I applied for a gazillion jobs, and I had in the end I had a choice between Lance Harder offered me like a restricted earnings job at Arkansas, or I got the head job at Hartwick, which was an hour from where I grew up. And so I also wonder if I had taken the job at Arkansas, what my life would look like to
Yeah.
this day. But
Yeah.
back to that high school boyfriend, I was back with him and I wanted to go back home. And
Always a
so,
guy. Yeah.
yeah, always a guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was close to home. As intriguing as Arkansas was,
Sure.
it was also not full time.
Hey, and here's the thing too, Jen. This is human nature, not just track and field coaching, but I love that you said that, like, man, I kind of wonder what would, because, we think about Lance Harder in Arkansas. I mean, Lance, I love Lance. What an amazing person in Arkansas, of course, speaks for itself. And a lot of times when we think back to those like forks in the road, so here's a fork in the road you had, okay, Hartwig close to home, Arkansas. And now you kind of, you look back and like, oh, I wonder what would happen. And a lot of times we do that because we think like, oh man, if I'd have gone to Arkansas, maybe I'd be the head coach of USC right now. Who knows, right? But we forget that the other side is equally as possible. I could have gone to Arkansas and you know what, just gotten burnt out or had an incident or whatever, and I'm out of coaching. Like that is also, when you think about the multiverse, that is also a line of the reality that could have happened, Jennifer. So no
Yeah.
regrets at all. I love that you went to Hartwick. Maybe not so love that it was because of a guy, because, I'm assuming that guy's not around anymore because you've not said my,
No.
yeah, okay, okay. So you go to Hartwick. So again, I still can't imagine you're 20, I mean, 23, 24 at the max at this point.
Yep. Yeah.
You've had
Yeah.
you had a strong head coach at Ithaca. Obviously leaned on them heavily. Obviously, the coach at Marshall had to be fairly strong because he's leading four newbies. I mean, that alone is a handful while also coaching. But you still don't know the day to day. What's a schedule look like? What's a budget look like? What's
Yeah.
recruiting look
Yeah.
like from this side? How did you navigate that?
So interestingly, there was one head coach at Hartwick and he was fired. And they hired two head coaches. We were co-head coaches, a man and a me.
Oh,
And we were both just out of grad school.
oh,
And so we figured it out together. And we couldn't have been more opposite, him and I.
mhm,
Like night and day people. He was a distance guy. I was the sprints, hurdles, field person.
mhm.
But we got hired as co-ed coaches, and when we got there, there was no one on the team. So he had a lot of recruiting experience from his GA.
Okay.
And so he taught me a lot about recruiting.
Okay.
And we used to have challenges, nightly challenges of how many people we could call in a night.
Wow.
And then weekly challenges and then monthly challenges. So we used to put the number up we shared an office.
Yeah.
At night, he'd go on the outside of the office and use the phone, and I would use the phone in the inside of the office. But we would have like numbers up on the board and he would beat me every week. He would beat me out all the time of how many calls he'd make. But he taught me a ton about recruiting, and I coached everything but distance, and he coached distance. But then he had to, because I can't do it all. So he learned how to coach throws. So he coached throws and distance, and I coached everything else. And we recruited a lot and created a team because we didn't have anybody on the team. We had like four girls on cross country and one guy, and we maybe had like, I don't know, 12 people in the spring that first year
Right.
for our track team. But when I left there, I had a national champion. So we taught each other a lot.
Yeah.
And we figured it out. And I called Coach Nichols every day. It was like,
okay,
what do I do? What do I do?
'cause
And he walked me through everything. Like, again, like he is a lifesaver to this day,
Yeah.
and it's like I called him every day. And then I apologized every day for me being a pain in the butt as a student athlete. Because I was like, I am so sorry I did this and that and the other thing. I was like, I am living it now. I'm so sorry.
Right.
I used to apologize all the time, like,
Love
Coach,
it.
I'm so sorry I was that person, and
Love it.
yeah, I called him every day. Like,
I was gonna,
how do I What do I do with this? What do I do with that?
I was going to ask because you mentioned as a GA you called him about workout. So did you
Oh, all
continue?
time.
Did you lean on West Virginia Marshall coach as
Not
well?
not as much. I
Yeah,
I called him a little bit,
yeah,
but you know, Coach Nichols was really the guy who
yeah.
like the
Makes
first
sense.
4 years of my career between GA and Hartwick,
Yeah,
yeah, I probably called him every day.
yeah.
Like
Makes
I
sense.
just, how do I handle this? What do I do with this?
Yeah,
And again, it was not like you could go online and look. Like
right,
it was, you had to ask. You had to
right.
like, read or ask. Like there really wasn't
Mhm.
any other options.
Yeah, something I was thinking about as you're going through this story up until here at Hartwick, um, you had some early strong female role models. Something that strikes me is, I've done 300 of these now, Jennifer, and I've interviewed women who are in they're 25 years old, it's their first coaching job, and I've interviewed women like Karen Dennis, who now retired, longtime Ohio State and UNLV coach. And I'm struck by, sometimes, or a lot of the times I hear the story of, I didn't even know I could coach Mike because every coach I had was a male. So, no one looked like me. And then, an assistant coach wasn't even my group or something like that. It was a woman. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe that means I can do it. But you had, going back thinking about that middle school PE teacher, gymnastics teacher, like you had some from early age of like this is normal. See, which it is normal, by the way, guys and gals out there. But you had some like normalcy of like, oh yeah, doesn't matter, male, female. Okay, I can do this
Yeah.
too.
No,
Yeah.
I did. My high school coach and my PE teacher, high school track coach, and then my gymnastics coach, yeah, were both
Right.
women.
Right.
And I think, yeah, again, I looked at them and was like, yeah, I want to be that. I want to
Yeah.
be them.
Yeah.
And, in college, we had like every other varsity coach coached another sport. So all of our assistant coaches were head coaches of other sports. So we had one female
Mm.
coach who was our jumps coach in college, but you didn't see a lot of women
Yeah.
when I was an athlete.
Yeah. And you still don't, by the way. When I uh, look at the landscape of coaches today, when I look at the athletes, big rough swaths of knowledge here, but when I look at the athletes in college and high school for track and field, it's roughly 50% men and 50% women, roughly. When I look at the college athletes, it's roughly 50% men, 50% women. When I look at coaches, I do not see nowhere close. I can't even say roughly 50-50. It's not. So it's still not um, um, reminiscent of what the athletic side of it is. So it is still, I don't want to call it rare. I think about the women's program at USTIF CCA. I've kept my eye on that program since it started. It started with, this many women, and now there's a lot more. It's grown, and I think that does help our women in coaching. And again, just I think sometimes I hear this over and over, whether I'm talking to an African American coach, talking to a women's coach, a coach who's a woman, that sometimes you just got to see it to even believe that it's possible. I got to see that a woman is a coach. Oh, okay, I could do that. And if I'm African American, I got to see that an African American can be a coach. Oh, I can be a coach. And so it's just interesting. Through your era, you're still in the early era of, again, no pole vault, no hammer, no steeple, things that we take for granted today. But you had some role models from the get go, and that's interesting. I just love that, and it's cool because whether you like it or not, you're now that for other. There's women on your team that go, oh yeah, this is just normal. If I want to be a coach, I can. If I don't have to either. So I just thought that was worth pointing out. So you mentioned at Hartwick, I love this. He probably cheated, by the way, but I love this competition where he always beats you. He was in the hallway, so he's fudging some numbers here. But you guys had this daily, nightly, weekly, monthly. Like I just loved kind of that grind, hustle, mentality. But then you kind of slipped it in, but you ended with a national champion. How those are two different ends of that spectrum. How did you go from, boy, we got nobody on the team, we got to call everybody, to a national champion? There's people that go through their coaching career and never have a national champion. How did this turn out?
Recruiting, really good recruiting. Like I said, it was a challenge and we were both really competitive. And so we just pounded the pavement. Like we just made calls and had kids on campus. And um And so, yeah, I recruited some really great athletes, and I'll never forget. I recruited this high jumper, and she came to visit, and she was the Massachusetts state champion, and um, Paul Souza was recruiting her to Wheaton,
Mhm.
and I knew Paul, and it was him and I, and she ended up choosing Hartwick. And she eventually became a multinational champion. She actually had the national record for a long time at 181 until a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I mean, I recruited really well and
Yeah.
had some great athletes that went to nationals. And Ria was a multiple time national champion and a really good high jumper. She also ran cross country, and
Wow.
she was like that 800 high jumper person that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
She was like a 216 half miler and a 5'11 high jumper.
Wow. What year of coaching at Hartwick did she win her first national title with you?
98,
No, I'm sorry, not
97.
I'm sorry, not what year, like calendar year. Was it your second year at Hartwick, third year at Hartwick?
Oh,
Yeah.
uh, third year, third
So
year.
again, there's coaches. Winning's hard, and I think we forget about that in track and field sometimes because there's so many events and things like that, and there's indoor track, outdoor track, cross country, and so we kind of take it for granted a little bit sometimes. But winning is hard. You coach someone to win a national title in your third year of full-time coaching, fifth year if you count graduate assistantship. I mean, did you think like, oh man, this is easy? Like I'm gonna have national champs all the time. Like, or was it like, or did you kind of realize like, oh man, this might be like, this is pretty lucky. I don't want to say luck because there's preparation, but like, oh, that's maybe lightning in a bottle, so to speak.
No, my goal was to win a team championship.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to win a national championship as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know why, but I'm extremely competitive, and
Mm-hmm.
it's why I don't play golf because I'm bad at it. So, but yeah, no, that was the goal. I wanted to win everything. I wanted to win league championships. I wanted to win national championships. I wanted to be the best at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever that meant, the best coach, have the best athletes, win team championships, etc. I just wanted to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured it out, and I just worked hard, like just recruiting was it at that time.
Yeah. Uh, so how many years at Hartwick and where and why did we go next?
So I was at Harvick for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And in I don't know, 97
Okay.
maybe, I flew to Long Beach, California and took my first level two.
Okay.
And because I had this high jumper coming in, I needed to be better at jumps coaching. So I flew to Long Beach and I did level two jumps.
Nice. Boo?
And Diane Woolley.
Oh,
At
yes. Love her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I met Diane and picked her brain about, I said, like, I got this great high jumper coming in. I need to learn more about high jump. And so while I was there, I also met Kathleen Rasky.
Oh, come on.
Yep. She was in my jumps cohort, and her and Diane are very good friends. And so while I'm there, I got to meet Kathleen, and at the time, she had just started at Central Michigan. And so she says to me, "Hey, do you want to come and be my jumps coach?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Like, I just like, no, I can't. Like I literally just got to Hartwick.
Right, right.
Um, and in the meantime, I had actually been offered the head coaching job at Ithaca,
Wow.
and I turned it down.
Really? I mean, that's
Yeah.
alma mater. I mean, that
I
was
know.
life-changing
I
place
know.
for you.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I'd been a head coach at Hartwick for a year, and they decided to split the programs and to hire a woman.
Okay.
And so I interviewed, I got offered the job, and I turned it down
Yeah,
because,
why?
and no one
Yeah,
believes me,
I'd say why. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't think I was good enough. I had all these coaches that I knew that were here, like all those coaches that I had as professors. I was like, I don't think I'm at that level. Like, I don't think I'm that great. And so I turned it down.
Jennifer.
I know.
I, I,
I
I
would
mean,
have been here like 30 years.
I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I get it. but on the same, the other side of the coin, I don't get it. So, because on one side, like I have a real a special place in my heart for alumni who coach at their alma mater. Like that just means like, when you call a recruit and tell them how great Ithaca is, it's like, it's not because they give me a paycheck. I went to school here. That like I chose it out of all the schools, right? Like that just
Yeah.
means a lot to me. So like there's a home feeling, and especially, the years of separation, meaning not many, like, so you walk in automatically knowing people in admissions and in the administration,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
could also see that of like, yeah, I sure do, Mike. And you know what? They still know me as little Jenny, the sophomore high jumper. What it's like I'm not there, so I get both sides of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And everyone was shocked. Like the AD was like, really,
Yeah.
Jen? I'm like, I know. So that I was on offer. And then Kathleen was like, come
Mhm.
to Central Michigan, be my jumps coach. And I was like, I just got here.
Right.
So a year later, or 2 years later, I can't even remember, Kathleen reached out to me again and she said, hey, I have a distance job open. And I had sent, I was the women's head cross country coach, and I had sent some athletes to nationals for cross country. And so she's like, you've had success. Do you want to be my distance coach? And I was like, oh, geez, and so I kind of at that point was like, well, maybe I want to be a Division 1 coach.
Mhm.
They were going to build this new facility, and she offered like, I could be in the MAC and blah, 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 blah. So I took it and I moved to Michigan.
Dude.
And so I was there um not even a year. Of course, I left a boyfriend
Oh
in
yeah.
Oneonta, New York,
Yeah.
and that I thought would be okay. I thought he'd move there and he didn't. And so it was a great experience being a distance coach at Division 1. Kathleen is and was an amazing mentor. I learned so much from
Oh yeah.
her.
Yep.
Like it was the best decision I ever made to do it. Excuse me. But the following summer, Cortland, now mind you, when I left to go to Michigan, the person that they hired when I turned the job down at Ithaca
Mm.
left. And so they called me back and said, will you take this job at Ithaca? And I said, no, I'm moving to Michigan. So now I've been offered it twice. I know people don't believe me. So I said, sorry, I'm going to Michigan. So I go to Michigan. I coach distance for a year. And then Cortland does the same thing that Ithaca was doing, where they split the programs. Jack Daniels was the head of
Oh,
both,
right. Hmm.
and they wanted a woman. And they wanted someone to elevate the rest of the program. Like he had done all this stuff with distance runners and cross country, and they wanted someone to like bring the rest of the events to that level.
Right.
So it was closer to home and closer to my boyfriend. And so I took the job.
Wow.
And so I moved from Michigan to Cortland. And that was a huge deal because Cortland is Ithaca's rival. And everyone was like, what are you doing?
You
Like, you
turn
can't go.
down Ithaca, but you go to the rival
Right,
twice, by the
right.
way. Dude.
So, so everyone was like, you can't wear red. You can't be a dragon. I was like, well, I am. So, here I am. And so I had turned Ithaca down twice. And now I'm at Cortland and I'm doing what they want me to do, like start elevating the rest of the events. And so I coached men's sprints and hurdles, and I was the head coach for women for track. I taught in the PE program. It was like a dream job.
Wow.
And I was closer to home, and the boyfriend didn't last. So it was great. I'm a lifer. I'm going to be at Cortland for the rest of my life. And the person that got the job when I turned it down the second time, he left. And so Coach Nichols calls me up and he's like, Jan, you're not going to believe this, but Matt left and the job is open again. And I was like, oh, okay. So I applied and I got the job.
Well, okay.
And
First of all, did you take it this third time?
yes,
Okay, because I was going to say, why did you apply? If you told me you turned it down the third time,
no,
I'd be like, well, why did you even apply? What are you doing here? You're
yeah,
messing with everybody's feelings here.
no, I know. No, I took it. It was it was 2003 in December where I left Cortland and started at I
Uh,
started mid-year. But
How,
yeah, it was like the time. It was finally right. Like I
yeah,
had learned
yeah, yeah,
everything I felt like I needed to know and experience the things that I needed to experience that I
yeah.
could come back here and do the job the way I wanted to do it. And
Right, right.
so, yeah, I know. Everyone was it was
So,
beside themselves.
so how long were you at Cortland? Did you say
3.5 years.
3.5 years? And Ithaca for 3 or 4.
Hartwick was full.
Sorry, Hartwick. Thank you.
Yep.
Central Michigan a year. What's interesting because as you're listening to the story and she's talking about now on the third time accepting Ithaca, unless we find out there was a blip where she left Ithaca, you've now been at Ithaca for
1.
21 years. What I love about this is we interview and we judge people based on their resumes first and foremost. I don't want to say it's necessarily all that different in track because we know a lot of people in track, so it's easy to go beyond the resume real quick. But like in the professional world, private sector here where we are, like when we get open a job like we have now, that's our first judgment is that resume, and it's easy like go back to your first year at Ithaca, first year of this 20 something years here. It's easy to have looked at your resume and go, she's a job hopper, guys. Look at it. She was here for 4. Wow, 4 was a long time. She goes to Central 1 year. Boom. She goes to Cortland 3 years. Like it would be easy to judge of like, guys, if we hire her, maybe we get her for 3, 4. Maybe she stretches and we get her for 5 or 6, but we ain't getting some stability here. This, be prepared to have the job description sent out again, boys and girls, because she's not here. And yet, because it reminds me a lot of me. I coached for 10 years and I was at 5 different institutions in 5 years. So I was that job hopper. Then I, crazily went to Vegas and played poker for a living. And so when my boss now still today, when he got my resume, that was when I remember during the interview, he was like, so do you really want this job? Or is this like a year, 2 year? Like, we don't have time for that. It's not good for us. It's not good for you. And, and of course I couldn't have thought, here I am almost 19 years later. I couldn't also not see that, but here I am 19 years later. So it's just interesting about judgments and you never know.
Never thought about it.
You never know. Yeah, when you're telling me this, I'm like, oh, Jen, you're a job hopper. That's what that tells me. And then yet I know you've been at Ithaca for a long time. So just maybe a lesson of not judging people. And you just don't know. Jennifer, the opposite could have been true. You could have been at Hartwick for 15 years and Ithaca hires you because it's like, oh, she's stable and it's alma mater. And you'd be like, yep, I'm gone after a year. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know. Because there's many different
Yeah.
reasons. The reasons you left and went to these different places were all different. And why you didn't go to Ithaca twice, there are specific reasons for these things. They're not
Yeah.
good or bad reasons. They are your reasons. So super interesting. Okay. So, much like baseball and 3 strikes, you're out. You hit it on the third one. You actually say yes. Ithaca hits it on the third one. You actually say yes, and you join Ithaca. What I'm interested, this is something I'm always interested, piques my interest. So you go to Ithaca as the coach. Jim, who was your coach, is still there. Now, that is a different relationship. You're used to much more, I shouldn't say you're used to, but your relationship before was much more subservient. You were athlete, Jim was coach. It got closer to peer as you became a coach and relied on Jim's expertise and experience and helped me out, but you're still not peer. You're still, still like, hey, that was my coach, probably still called him coach, and things like that. Now, you're the head coach of the women's program. He's the head coach of the men's program, and there's still, their experience is still experience. So maybe he's one notch of like the subservience, but you're much closer to. You're making decisions that he may not have made based on your now experience and expertise. How do you go from athlete Jennifer to professional Jim and Jennifer having to still pull in the same rope for the overall program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that point is probably had something to do with why I didn't take the job the first time was I felt like would I do it the way it's been done or
Right,
the way that he had done it?
right,
Not that it was good or bad per se,
right, right.
but would I have my own thought, right? And I felt like between not being good enough and or not experienced enough, that was kind of something that went through my head. So by the
Absolutely.
time I came back, I felt like I had learned enough and created my coaching style and philosophy.
And created some separation there. That's the kind of, it's
Right.
almost like a child, like, pushing them out of the nest, if you will. There needs to be some
Right.
separation, and have your own experiences and internalize those and come up with your own coaching philosophy, which means not
Right.
just X's and O's, but how you would run a program. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Love it.
Yeah. So, it was like, so I brought something to the table, I felt like at that point. And
Mhm.
so, we complemented each other in the things that were his strengths, he continued to do, and things that I did differently than he did historically was what I brought to the table. And
Right.
so I felt like it was kind of like co-parenting, like this strength Coach Nichols had,
Yep.
and I do still call him Coach Nichols, and this is the strength that Jen has. And
Mhm.
so, I felt like when we came together, that was how that looked. And again, I felt like I was more confident
Mhm.
in that scenario than I was afraid I wasn't, 4 or 5 years before. And
I
so,
I did a little joking about your first and second time, rejection, but in reality, it's super important. It's the reason why I don't. Without saying I think it should be a rule, I don't think athletes who go on to become graduate assistants should be allowed to do their graduate assistants at their school, at their undergrad. Like, I love that you went to Marshall. I don't think I feel like there'd be some not so great things happening, and I think some not so great things happen when you become a GA at your own school. And I'm not talking about anything nefarious necessarily. I'm just talking about you go from a subservient role and an athlete to now you're the coach, and you have zero experience except for all the coaches that are still there. So what do you really bring into the go again, get out
point.
of that nest and go learn and fail and succeed on your own and have other people pour into you. So I actually absolutely love that you didn't take the first or even the second strikes at Ithaca, and that again we are where we're supposed to be when we're there. That the third time, this was the right time for you to, not only for you but for the program. You added so much more to the program and to Jim. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
at that point, that's so much better.
Yeah. It was, that was, and again, people don't believe me when I tell them, but that
Yeah,
was a lot of what I thought about
yeah.
when I was offered it the first time
It's
was, what
it
do I bring right
it,
now?
it's much more funnier because they actually offered you the job twice and you turned it down. Not just like, oh, I didn't even apply. I kept going, it's much more funny. They're like, yeah, they actually offered. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing it. But again, a lot of self-awareness there, which that's kind of a tough thing in life is self-awareness. So I love that self-awareness. So what do you grow? It's funny, a couple of years ago at USTFCA, sitting around with a group of coaches, and we were trying to think about coaches that had been in a school for a length of time, 20 years and stuff. And there's some immediate guys like Mouse and Curtis Fry at that time and things like that. It was like, oh yeah, but once we got past 10. Boy, it was hard to think of a Jennifer Potter. It's hard. There's just not many of us that stayed 20 plus years at a place. Jim was there for a long time as well. Did you think when you this third time, this time that you like, could you foresee yourself there at 20 years, or has this just been a growth for you?
No, yeah. I mean, I think that it was like, okay, this is my last stop. Like I've done all the things I needed to do.
You said that about Aniana too, though.
Yeah, but I said it about Cortland, but I never thought
Oh,
I'd be
Cortland.
offered the
Sorry.
job at Ithaca again, to be
Okay.
very honest.
Okay.
Like if I was not going to be at Ithaca, I was going to be 30 minutes away,
Gotcha.
right? And so and still be close to my alma mater. And
Gotcha.
so yeah, I thought that was never going to happen again. But if it had, I would said I would go because my ultimate goal was to coach here.
Mhm.
And yes, when you turn it down twice, you think you're never going to get offered it again,
Right,
right? Yeah.
right.
So I was like, I'm content. I'm good. Cortland's great. A lot of opportunity. It's still close to home, still close to Ithaca.
Mhm.
So yeah, but
So walk us through. You've been there again. I'm sorry. Remind me how many years? What season is this for you at
this is
Ithaca?
season 22.
All right, so 22. So when you think back to 22 years ago, Jennifer, first head coaching at Ithaca, and you think about today in 2025, how have you grown? Like, do you look back at 22 years ago and go, oh man, I was making some decisions that, what was I thinking? Thank gosh I learned about that, and I don't do those things anymore. Like, how have you grown and developed over these 22 years?
It's your coaching style definitely evolves
Mhm.
with generations because the kids are different. Student athletes are different. They're not the same 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because this is my 33rd year of coaching, which blows my mind. But um, I think I'm still a track dork. Like my life revolves around track and field. That's, what it is. Like anything track and field I want to be a part of, I'm an official, I teach level one, like whatever I can do in the sport. That has not changed. I think the one thing that is I'm always wanting to learn more, and my coaching style, my X's and O's have changed. I'm not using the same workout I used 5 years ago.
Hmm.
I look at stuff. So for me, I think it's a constant evolve, of just, progressing. Like,
Hmm.
and I am not the person that does the same thing
Hmm.
2, 3, 4 years in a row per se. Like
Hmm.
we have traditions, but the workout that I did this day last year is probably not the same.
Right.
It probably resembles it in a physiological standpoint, but for me,
Right.
I've changed it and just to keep up with what's going on in that regard. But I don't think my track dorkiness has not changed, and my passion for the sport and the job has not changed.
Yeah.
And I think it's just more of evolving with what's going on around you,
Yeah.
and what the student athletes are bringing to the table is different just in general. So you have to change with that.
And maybe that's the answer to my next question here is, so how do you stay motivated, right? Like there are certainly things, experience allows us to have things that are, what you'd call like rote. Like driving a car today for you versus when you were 16, like 16, you had to think of everything and like, oh, the blinker and oh, a little bit more in the get. Now you just get in the car and you drive, it's rote. You don't have to think about those things. Same with coaching. There's a lot of things, whether it's like, this is how I make my schedule every year. This is how I budget. This is how I do the first team meeting. This is how I coach high jumpers. Uh, Physiologically, like the core is still there, but again, like you talked about, the workouts may change. But a lot of that becomes rote, and sometimes we can allow it to become so rote that there's not a lot of motivation to change. Like Mike, I coach a lot of good high jumpers. Why do I need to go learn more about the high jump? I do good now. How do you, after 30 years total of coaching, 20 plus years at Ithaca, because again, there's things, where the admissions office is, where the cafeteria, like there's just things that this is just my day, Mike. How do you stay motivated to continue to hustle with recruiting, hustle with coaching, hustle with making your program better, alumni, donation, things like that? How do you stay motivated and not hit cruise control?
I don't want to lose. I like to win. I want to be the best at everything. I'm not gonna lie. Like I struggle with not having the best program, not doing, having a happy, healthy program, alumni that are leave here and say, I'm glad I went to Ithaca and was part of this program. Like I want everyone's experience to be as great as mine as when I was here. And so like coming to Ithaca was the best choice I ever made as a high school senior. And I had the most amazing 4 years here. And so I want everyone to have that same experience that I had or better. And so I I I just want to do everything I can for the student athlete that is in my power. And so I take a lot of pride in the fact that coaching Division 3, no one's paying them to be here. They show up every day because they want to be here. And that's really why I choose Division 3 over other levels
Right.
is there's nothing other than I want to be here going on. And
Yeah.
so anything I can do to make their experience as great as it can be is my job, and
Yeah.
I love it. I enjoy that interaction with student athletes, and people ask me my coaching philosophy, and my coaching philosophy is I want to challenge them to do something they never thought they could do, and that not just in track and field but in school and in life. I want to put possibilities into their mind that they never thought they could figure out, obtain, etc. So it's like every day is just what can I do next? How can I do that better? How do it differently? Not at all,
Right.
got to do it. So I am not a stagnant person and not very good at sitting still.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just a constant for me. Like, is this better? Is this worse? Do I change it? Do I do it? Like, I'm always evaluating how I do things. And so I think that's where motivation is that I can't sit still, because if I sit still, then things are going to evolve and I'm not going to have anything to do
Without
with
you.
it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's just not my style.
I love that. I feel like this quote I'm about to say is original. It's from me, but I'm sure I stole it from somebody else. You know, what you just described there is what I say is the real superpower of a coach. You have the ability to see something in others before they can see it themselves. When you're talking about, I love to, challenge them to see new things, to think about that, new ways that they could actually, that you can jump 6 feet in the high jump. I know you probably can't see it today, but I can because I've done it before. Like that just like that excites me. I love that, and it's obviously exciting to your athletes, your program. Again, when we talk about program, it's so much more than just athlete and coach. There's so many more things that get involved with that. So Jennifer, let's as we come close to our end time here, let's bring as much value as possible to others that are listening here, based on your experience. What would, some people think, and I probably me, this is probably me in my coaching career. My whole, I told you, 10 years, 5 different institutions. My whole goal was to get to the SEC, which that was my last place. I coached against Kathleen in the MAC. I was at Ball States. It kicked my butt. She's amazing. She's so good. So when you're talking about Central Michigan, I was like, oh man, I remember those years. God bless. She was too good. Uh, I was always searching for something. I thought you had to go somewhere every year or 2 or 3 years, right? Like if you were there for 10 years, like, oh, you're stagnant. Like I couldn't see that you can be at a place for 10, 20, 30 years and not be stagnant. It was like, that was stagnant to me. So there's people listening, there's coaches listening right now that are like, oh man, I have to move on. I have to move from high school to college. I have to move from D3 to D2 to D1. I have to move to, 5 different institutions. You have built an amazing life, an amazing career. It continues, by the way. This is not a eulogy, FYI. There's many, many more chapters left here in this story. But as we sit today in 2025, you've built an amazing thing. You talked about your love for Ithaca, what it helped build you as an undergrad, and now you're doing that with other undergrads, with young people. What's your best advice for people that are thinking about coaching, stability? Should I continue to move? Can I build a career and a life at one institution? What's kind of, when you think about talking to your younger self, maybe, what advice would you give for people that maybe think that I have to bounce around all around the country, every year, every month?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like recruits' parents will always be like, "Well, you've had all this success, when are you leaving?"
Oh.
And I'm like,
Even today, they'll ask you that.
"Oh yeah,
Oh my,
absolutely.
it's like,
Like
dude, I've been here 20
you've
years.
won this, you've won that, whatever. When are you like, are you staying?" And I'm
Right.
like, "Yeah, I'm staying." And I think the reasons is that the grass isn't greener on the other side. So many people think like, "Oh, you have to go Division 1 to have better X, Y, and Z." And trust me, that's not always the truth. I mean, I always tell recruits that, I have amazing facilities, I have amazing administration, I have support financially, et cetera, to do the things to be successful here. But I think one of the things is that, we're in sales, right? We're attracting, 18-year-olds and their parents to make a decision to, at the Division 3 level, spend at a private school, spends invest in their child's future or their own future.
Right.
So I kind of look at it as, if I'm going to sell a product per se or
Mm-hmm.
promote a product, I
Mm-hmm.
have to believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a product of this product.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like you have to be passionate about where you are. I feel like to do justice to the people that you are attempt to bring into your program. So if it's just a paycheck or it's just a stepping stone, I feel like, and you're not passionate about where you are, then that's hard because you're not in this for the money, not at least not me and where I'm at, but you're in it because you love it. You love the student athletes, you love the sport. And so bottom line, it's find a place that you can be passionate about in the sport that you're passionate about. Coach Nichols always used to say, find something you love to do and find someone dumb enough to pay you to do it. And here I am, right? And so, that's my advice to people is you have to just find the place where you feel like it's home and you feel like you would spend the rest of your life there because of what it's about and what the makeup is. And so for me, like I said, I had an amazing experience as a student athlete here. I love living in Ithaca. Now, I don't just love working at Ithaca, like I love living in Ithaca. And so when I've been reached out to about some other jobs, it's like, is that better than where I'm at? Do I want to live there? You know, is, yes, I've been offered more money in other jobs, like, but it's not about money. It is and it isn't, but is it worth me not being at a place that I'm not in love with? And I bleed blue. Like I love Ithaca. And so that's the reason to be where I'm at. So like as Coach Nichols says, find the place that's willing to pay you to do the thing you love. And for me, it's here.
Well, Jennifer, we have a position open right now for a salesperson.
I know, I saw that.
You don't need to turn in your resume. You got the job. You just tell me when you want to start and say your goodbyes to Ithaca. Tell all those recruit parents, you know what, you're right. I am leaving and come here to Champaign, Illinois. I'd hire you in a heartbeat because the way you said that about, hey, I'm in sales. So I hear that a lot, right? And we hire, most of our staff are former coaches and former athletes and things like that. And it's true. Like it is one of those things. It's like, yeah, it's it's different, but you're a salesman first and foremost, right? A great mentor of mine, Marshall Goss, that old saying, you can't turn chicken crap into chicken whatever, but you got to have good recruits. They got to have, again, genetic ceilings are there, right? But the way you put that about the product and selling like that's the best I've heard it actually explained when you talk about coaching and sales. So anyway, yep, Jennifer, come here. I've got a desk for you. We'll get to work. So
maybe in my retirement.
Yeah, I'll be here, so we'll make it happen. Absolutely. All right, Jennifer, in the last couple of minutes that we have here, tell us what's got you excited about Ithaca. You're in your 22nd, 23rd year. Person like you're already thinking about 2028, 2030, 2032. What's got you excited there about Ithaca, the bombers? Yeah, I almost said bomber man. The bombers.
Yeah.
What's got you excited there about your program as you look forward to the future here?
I am grateful and honored to coach the men and women in this program. Like they are just amazing people. And when I recruit people, I tell them I'm looking for great people first, great students, and then great athletes. And no one believes me when I say that, but that's the truth because I have had the privilege to get to know these kids, not kids. I call everyone my kids, but these men and women, their families, and they've become, part of my life. And so just the opportunity every day to hang out with them, to learn from them, to grow with them is an honor. I don't take it for granted. And it's just, we get amazing student athletes here across the board. So it's just every day is a treat, and a dream. And I just look forward to it. And it's just, I'm in a place that I believe in and trust and love, and that's why I am here. And I hope I never have to leave, until it's time, but, it's just a great place. And I've been very fortunate to be at my alma mater and, have great mentors. And, we didn't really say much about this, but you mentioned it. Like I've had some great mentors, and not just in Coach Nichols, but in some women. And I think that's key thing for anybody is have a mentor, and it doesn't have to be the same gender. Yep. But I do have to give like a shout out to Carla Coffey, who was a great mentor for me. And Barbara Crowson at McMurray. I was on the NCAA committee with her, and those two women really are still to this day mentors of mine, as well as Coach Nichols. And so I wouldn't be where I'm at today without those people. And I just need to make sure that I say that because that's a big part of my success is that mentorship that I've received. And that's why now with the coaches, at convention, we do the women's thing. And now last year we started that new coaches thing.
Yeah.
I want to be that person for somebody else
Yeah.
because I would never be where I'm at without those people at all.
I love that. And, mentioning Carla and Barbara, I know them both personally, great people. Bingo. I mean, to me, when someone tells me so-and-so is their mentor and it's like, oh, well, I know that person. Oh, then you're good. Like, those are your mentors. You're good. You're good. Um, and, sometimes coaches forget, they think about Barbara's and Carla's and Jim's and many other people that, you kind of stand on their shoulder. If it weren't for them, you aren't who you are today. But we forget sometimes that means we have the responsibility that people are on our shoulders. And so I think I know the leadership that you've shown the men and women at Ithaca. I think the leadership you've shown other coaches. Here's the crazy part. Certainly other coaches have come up to you and said, hey, thank you, Jennifer. I saw, or you helped me with this, or I saw it when you handled that. And those are great. Those are amazing. The crazy part about this is the majority of the positivity that you've put out into the world, you don't actually know about. You should know about it. Meaning, like, here, I'm telling you, you've done this, but there's plenty of people that you have no idea. They've seen you do something. They saw how you spoke to an athlete at a meet. They've listened to this episode here and heard your experience, and it has affected them positively. And through many, many reasons, they don't email you. They're too shy. Whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't think it's consequential enough. Whatever, blah blah blah. They think you hear it all the time. They don't say thank you. Hey, I'm this way because of you, and it's true. The things that you have done and have and will do and continue to do affect other people, specifically in our sport, thank God, positively. And that's the real whole reason we started this whole freaking podcast 5+ years ago, was to uplift and honor what you do. It's really,
Great.
really, really important. And so I'm just
Appreciate
so
that.
glad and so happy and so humbled that you would join us to share your journey. Again, there's some psychology to this whole thing about sharing your journey, like verbally saying your journey out loud. And so it's going to help a lot of people. I hope it helps you. Hope brightens your day. You've maybe had some memories that you haven't really thought about, and some people that you maybe haven't thought about. And at the end of the day, you have helped more people. Thousands of people are going to listen to this and hear your journey and learn from it, and maybe make a few less mistakes because of learning from yours.
Really hope.
Yeah, exactly. So Jennifer, thank you so much again for joining us here. I'm just struck, I've been searching, kind of studying more and more about, where you are is where you're supposed to be right now. And it really struck me that your journey really hit home with me about that, that it wasn't time to be at Ithaca the first time. It wasn't time. You were where you were supposed to be. You were supposed to be in Mount Pleasant, Michigan for that time period, right? That time period with her helped you to be who you are today. So it's really helpful for me to hear that as well. So thank you again. Appreciate your openness and authenticity, and just so thankful for your time today.
I appreciate it. It was fun to relive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. And again, this book ain't done. We're on chapter 3 of 20. You still got plenty of chapters left to go. And thank you guys and gals for being here again this week. Really just so grateful. These stories from these men and women that we share on the long form on Mondays is impactful. It's important and should be shared. I have a great responsibility here that in 20 years, someone's going to be hearing Jennifer's story and it's going to impact that legacy of coaches. And so it's important that we get these amazing human beings on wax here and hear their story. So thanks again for joining us. Share this around. Again, these stories are important and others need to hear it. So join us next week. We'll do it all over again. Thanks, guys.